Oh, hi, I'm Max Kaiser. This is the Kaiser Report. Yeah, I'm looking at my glasses here. I noticed I put little rubber bands on the end, so they don't slide off. And probably the next step would be like adult diapers, I'm thinking. That's where I'm at. Where are you at? Happy 2019. Stacy?
Are you still in 2019? We're like halfway through it already by this point.
My God.
I want to follow up on another point we made last episode because we talked about AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the youngest female ever elected to the House of Representatives, and she's kind of like mesmerizing the media. And you know what I realized is that I think she'll not only take away attention from any other Democratic candidate for 2020 and therefore perhaps Trump might win again in re-election, is that if she then becomes candidate in 2024 for the Democrats and wins presidency, that we will have skipped Generation X, that there will never, ever be a Generation X president in the United States of America, that we're like the middle child of generations.
Oh, that's your generation?
That's my generation.
So you have no representation politically? You got
Not
skipped
in the
over.
White House.
And it's going right to the millennials.
I think that could be what happens. That's what I'm forecasting. If Beto O'Rourke somehow becomes president in 2020, then we'll be Generation X.
It's kind of like Generation X was the afterbirth of the baby boomers.
Yeah,
it's kind of like the placenta of the baby boomers.
Well, you always have to go to the more vulgar.
I mean, that's what it is biologically. Am I speaking out? Am I triggering people?
Well, nobody likes to hear that sort of stuff. But, I would put it in a more eloquent sort of way and say, like, we are the middle child of generations. We're overlooked. We have the baby boomers. They are a huge population. The baby boom after World War II. Millions and millions of American babies. They grabbed all the attention. The media was mesmerized by them. They were the power generation, the love generation, the hippie generation. Then they became the yuppie generation. And then they ruled America and they ruled Wall Street and everything came to them and we were ignored. And now the millennials are coming up. And one thing the millennials have over what Generation X had was, of course, the fact that flights and flying and traveling around the world is so much easier, and we have the internet to make the world so much smaller and closer. So they do have a little bit more of a worldly sort of way about them, which is probably why they have not only good food, better food than Generation X ever came up with, better, maybe not really music, but they definitely have ideas like Medicare for all and stuff like that.
Right, yeah, AOC is a genuine feeling of hope and change. Whereas Barack Obama, who went into the campaign with those messages, it seemed like he was faking it. Like, I never thought he was sincere. He was very dishonest in his presentation. But AOC, I really believe she is full of hope and change, and she's full of beans. She's full of energy. She's ready for another. A cycle is turning over in America. This is the beginning of a whole new political cycle. I'm totally excited by her. I'm going to vote for her in 2024. I'm already decided that.
That's because you can't help yourself, because she's persuasive, as Scott Adams would say. Now, I want to look at another headline here, and this happened over the past week and a half, and it's a tweet. It's from the Attorney General of Pennsylvania, and he seems so impressed with himself about the great work he's doing about Wells Fargo, owned mostly, biggest shareholder is Warren Buffett, ukulele playing Warren Buffett. He said, "We're announcing a $575 million 50-state settlement with Wells Fargo for opening unauthorized accounts and charging consumers auto insurance and mortgage fees they didn't actually owe. The bank duped customers, and with this settlement, we're working to change corporate behavior." A financial settlement of a fraction of their ill-gotten gains. Look at that. As he admits, they opened unauthorized accounts. Like, that's fraud. That's outright fraud. You try going into a Wells Fargo and opening a bank account for Joe Bag of Donuts, and you're going to be thrown in jail for 20 years. Here, charging consumers auto insurance and mortgage fees that they didn't actually owe. Wells Fargo also announced that, we accidentally foreclosed on 900 homes that didn't belong, in the foreclosure system. So this is why
we've been doing this show for 10 years.
Yeah.
And we've been covering the model of the big banks of the world: HSBC, Lloyd's, Barclays, Royal Bank of Scotland, then JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank, Wells Fargo, Bank Paribas. And the model is very, very, very simple. You keep 90 cents of every dollar you steal. That's the model. That's what their earnings are based on. If you stripped out the fraud from Wells Fargo's business model, they would be losing an unconscionable amount of money, and they would actually have to declare bankruptcy many, many, many quarters ago. Same thing for every major bank in the world. If they were accounted for in a generally accepted accounting principles, according to the rule of law, they would have all been closed down many years ago. But it's like the old Woody Allen joke. He goes to the doctor and says, "Doctor, my brother thinks he's a chicken." And the doctor says, "Here, give him these pills." And he says, "You don't understand, doctor. We need the eggs." Okay? Yeah. Fraud runs the American economy. Without banking fraud, there would be no GDP whatsoever.
That's what I'm saying about this generational shift. The baby boomers have done very, very, very well off of that fraud. Their entire pension plans are based on that fraud being allowed to continue. But that fraud has only been able to continue based on defrauding the next generation below it, who are now a bigger voting bloc. There are more millennial voters than there are baby boomer voters at this point in time. And millennials are like, hello, we are not going to pay for your fraudulent pensions and your fraudulent lifestyle and all that sort of stuff. We are going to say, basta, enough. And that's what you're seeing, the shift. You're seeing the shift into Bitcoin because of the monetary system is also based around the incumbents, and the incumbent empire, which is America, and the incumbent beneficiaries of that empire, which were the baby boomers. And now they're at a very difficult place where they have to give it up. The baby boomers they've done very well. They've lived a great lifestyle on that fraud. But the younger generation are like, well, okay, you can have your fraudulent system. Go find a new Ponzi, because we're going to go to this new monetary system that we've invented and we've come up with and we're creating and we're operating in, which is Bitcoin. You guys can have your fake one and find some sucker to take those dollars.
Right. And to tie this into another big story we've covered for 10 years, and that is the complicity of the central banks. Yeah. So when you have a Wells Fargo and they have to pay this huge fine to cover up the fraud, that money that they use to pay that fine is taken from the central bank. They're borrowed from the central bank at near 0% interest rate, and then they restructure their balance sheet, they restructure their own bond portfolio, and they extend the maturity. Extend and pretend.
Oh, and as also you've said, they find they're committing new frauds right now, and they'll say, oops, my bad, next time they get caught.
Right, they are committing new frauds today. Yeah. That'll be in the story next year. But the complicit partner in this extend and pretend story is the central bank by lowering interest rates now for 37 years. But nothing can go on forever like that. So we're at a juncture in the economic cycle where interest rates are starting to tick up. That's how we know with certainty that the jig is up. That's how we know for certainty that I believe that AOC will be president in 2024.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like there's the jig is up in that 37 years of declining interest rates. That's also the baby boomers. That's been feeding the baby boomers in this fraudulent Ponzi scheme. They've done well in it. They've lived very well with it. But at the end of the year, it's no coincidence that in the past year, 2018 was the first election where we had more millennials than baby boomers, and that whole system is going to fall apart. It's going to split like that. It was slowly and then suddenly.
Not to split hairs, but okay, you have to break the baby boomer generation into two distinct parts, which would be pre and post the yuppies, because you did have a major recession in the 70s where interest rates skyrocketed under Paul Volcker, and that was a 2 or 3 year hellacious economic period in American history. But since the early 80s, the rise of the yuppies, of which I am a proud member of that class of Wall Street yuppie 1982.
We've all seen your video.
I've been living on free money now since 1982. And then we got into Bitcoin at $1. So it just extended that reign of unbelievable.
Yeah, but you and Barack Obama were the very last of the baby boomer generation, like the last year or two. You guys are called Generation Jones. So you guys had a little bit more hope. You guys became a little bit bitter because you had the man on the moon when you guys were like 8 or 9 years old. And then you thought, hey, everything is possible. But that was like the last time we ever did it. It was like a trick. It's like, we're never going to do that again, except for maybe now that we're going to compete with the Chinese.
That's why I love Elon Musk, because he inherited the whole man on the moon excitement from the late 1960s. New York Jets won the Super Bowl. New York Mets won the World Series. We had a man landing on the moon, and times were good.
Well, remember there was a television series when we were young, or a movie about Logan's Run, and anybody who turned 35 had to get into some sort of, do a race, and basically you would get killed, and that was the way to get rid of old people. And I think it was like at 35 that they considered old at that point. But we're on that sort of cusp right now. You really feel it generationally. Something's happening around the world, a lot of uprisings, the Gilets jaunes sort of thing. It's younger people fed up with the purchasing power. They talk about their purchasing power. The purchasing power is going down because of the older generation that has benefited for the last 35 years, 37 years of interest rates falling and extending and pretending that they're going to retire with some great pension that is really being taken through the Cantillon effect of the central bank taking money essentially from the bottom 99% and lifting it up towards the top.
Well, let me add to that. So neoliberalism, which was first expressed by Reagan Thatcher, went global.
Yes.
And all the central banks began to work together, including, Nomi Prinz wrote a book called Collusion, about central banks working together.
Yeah.
And now the Gilets jaunes is really part of the global insurrection against banker occupation. This is the first global insurrection to fight against globalism and the global dominance of central banks. It's becoming a global yellow vest movement, will be in every single country. So ever since Occupy Wall Street, we've been saying, how come there's no Occupy Wall Street Athens, Occupy Wall Street Gaza, Occupy Wall Street, Caracas or Georgia? Now the Gilets jaunes will go global.
Yeah, but again, even though Trump is, I think he's even older than a baby boomer, but even though he was elected, the fact is what Hillary Clinton had been promising in 2016 was more of the same. And the fact is that the millennials, who were all backing Bernie, who were going to rip it down, they wanted to rip it down. This is just part of a process. There's no sort of conspiracy. It's just a natural process of what happens during cycle shifts. Some people call it a fourth turning. But generations, it's a natural cycle of burning it all down, not in a violent revolution, but a peaceful one of Bitcoin and new ideas that are just going to happen. And I think the baby boomers are going to have to start being nicer to millennials.
Schumpeter called it creative destruction.
Yes.
It's just part of the cycle of life, baby. You got to clear the forest to make room for more seedlings, and we're at the global insurrection point.